Happy National Signing Day. Today, Nebraska wrapped up their class of 2024, and in this video, we're going to go over every single prospect that Matt Rhule signed, some of the best of the bunch, the guys at the end of the class, and some guys to watch who could even not redshirt next year and be instant starters. So in this video, we're going to go over all of that and more, but before we do, if you like the content, please hit the like button on the video, along with hitting the subscribe button. We're going to have videos all offseason about Nebraska football, so if you want consistent updates, please hit the subscribe button. Really helps me out. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So yeah, everybody that Nebraska had committed ended up signing today. We had no surprises. Nobody flipped last second. We did have a couple of guys who were uncommitted signed with Nebraska last second. We'll get into those guys. But let's start it off from the top. The top of the class, obviously the best player in the class, that being Dylan Rola. I know that's, again, he's been the storyline the last 3 weeks, it feels like. Him decommitting from Georgia, now coming to Nebraska. This is the best of the bunch. This is the second best player in the country, according to 24/7. This is the best quarterback in the country. This guy is an instant starter for Nebraska. I believe he's the quarterback one the second he steps on campus in January. Everything you want from a prospect, he has it. He can throw the ball 70 yards down the field. He's a pocket passer. He has great awareness in the pocket, but he can scramble when he needs to. Some say that his best attribute is his brain. He makes high IQ decisions during distress. He has great progressions. You don't see that very often from seniors in high school. This guy has it all. This guy is borderline generational. One of the better prospects we've seen at the quarterback position in the last decade. That's how good of a prospect Dylan Rola is. So obviously a huge win by Matt Rhule and the staff, and this is the biggest recruit that we have gotten in a long time. But I'm not going to go too much into Dylan Rola. I know we've already talked about him extensively. So he is ranked number 2 in the country. That is the first man that we announced today, first guy who signed, and he's the biggest one. Number 2, that being Carter Nelson, top 100 prospect out of Ainsworth, Nebraska, the best in-state player we have seen in a very long time to come from Nebraska. He is signed as a tight end, but he played all over the field for Ainsworth. It was funny when I follow him on Twitter, and I saw he posted his statistics of his senior year. He had over 1,000 passing yards, over 1,000 rushing, and over 1,000 receiving yards, along with having 200 tackles. I mean, this is a guy who can play anywhere around the field. I will say this about Carter Nelson. I think a lot of people expect a little too much of him. He's a super athlete. Let's call it what it is. But he's 6'5", 220 pounds. You cannot play as a tight end in the Big Ten. That's a traditional tight end meaning. You can't do that at 220. Tight end is probably the hardest position to play as a true freshman because there's no tight ends that are instantly built coming out of high school. None of them are 250 because most of them played wide receiver when they were in high school, like Carter Nelson has. So I don't expect him to play as a true freshman. A lot of people do. It's just hard. He's not going to get 25 pounds of muscle in the offseason. It's just not going to happen. So this is a guy that I absolutely expect to redshirt, but he's going to be a stud when he gets on the field. No doubt about it, but don't expect him to play as a true freshman. It's incredibly hard at the tight end position. I was researching it because I was interested to see who the last true freshman was to actually get a bunch of extensive reps at the tight end position for us. And it ended up being Sethan Carter, like about a decade ago. And the reason why was because Sethan Carter was on campus at 250 coming out of high school. So there's just tight end prospects aren't built like that anymore. Looking at Brock Bowers plays a true freshman. He was also around that weight range. So we need to see Carter Nelson gain about 15, 20, 25 pounds in order for him to get on the field. And I don't think that happens his first year. So I'd cool the brakes a little bit on that. But heck of a talent, man. Next, Grant Bricks, offensive lineman coming in from Iowa. This was another huge win by the staff. Man, I mean, Oklahoma was coming after him. Kansas State was coming after him for a long time. He was leaning to those schools, and we had an incredible effort along the stretch of his commitment, or excuse me, his recruitment. We brought the semi-truck to his high school. I went to some of his games. So Grant Bricks ends up committing. This is a big one. Everybody you talk to in Iowa says this guy is probably the best O-lineman in state. Great kid in the classroom as well. Just a huge win. And we need to build this O-line. And this is a guy who will be here for the next 45 years and will make this O-line a lot better. Another big win there, top 200 prospect. Then we have Roger Gradney. Now, Roger Gradney was one of the first guys to even commit to this class. He plays wide receiver and defensive back. More likely than not, he will play wide receiver for us. Listed at 6'1", 190, so really good weight there. But this guy can play all over the field. He runs track. He has a great 40 time already. He runs about a 4.4 as a senior in high school. And this is a guy that Matt Rhule described as being incredibly loyal. Again, he committed very early on in the process. He never wavered. He was always Nebraska's Cornhusker. Love this guy. I think he can make an instant impact anywhere on the field. Good, really good weight, really good kid. Another huge win. I mean, this is a common theme you see from Nebraska, is that a lot of these top gets are just really good individuals outside of the field. So another nice get there by Matt Rhule. Now on to probably my biggest favorite in this class, that being Present Tamoa, coming from Hawaii. 4-star offensive lineman. He's listed at 6'4", 115 pounds, a lot of that being good weight. Just dominated in Hawaii his senior and junior seasons. This guy is a stud. Will be interesting to see if he early enrolls. We have not got information about that yet, but this guy, man, this is a cornerstone addition to the offensive line. And I keep saying this. I've been a big fan of this for a long time. Get the Polynesian pipeline going at Nebraska. You have Donovan Rola, who has Polynesian blood in him, and he's getting that Polynesian pipeline back. A lot of these O-linemen come from either Hawaii, they come from Utah, they come from California. These Polynesian kids, they produce O-linemen, they produce linebackers at a high rate. Like, I always watch Utah, and I'm so jealous because they have these just insanely talented Polynesian kids. We need to tap into that. And hopefully Don Rola continues to do so, because Preston Tamoa is going to be a stud. So off the bat, another really good offensive line addition. Next one, Jakori Barney, wide receiver coming from Miami, Florida. He's listed at 6 foot tall, 160. Had offers from about everywhere in the country. Now, this was a really interesting recruitment. He was leading Nebraska for a little while. Then right at the end, the day before he was set to commit, all these crystal balls started coming in. He was going to go to Miami. It looked like all signs pointed to the Hurricanes, and he ended up staying with Nebraska last second. It hasn't wavered ever since then. So this is a really big get. Another really fast addition. He has great hands. He really reminds me of Marcus Fleming coming out of high school, another Miami wide receiver who we signed. And I was a big fan of Marcus Fleming. So Jakori Barney, really good addition, 4-star receiver there. I don't expect him to play as a true freshman, but I love his ceiling. Love his ceiling. Next one up, we have a trio of Bellevue West kids, starting off with the quarterback, Daniel Kalin, 4-star. Daniel Kalin has a lot of upside. He was an Elite 11 finalist. He's had offers since he was a sophomore in high school before he even played varsity snaps. He's listed at 6'2", 200 pounds, big arm, really good kid. I love his upside. I'll say this about Danny Kalin. He is not ready to play just yet. And I think that's what you get in this class by getting 2 quarterbacks. You get a guy in Rola who has that upside, who can play right away. And then you have, Kalin, who's kind of struggled in high school. Let's call it a buck. I watched Daniel Kalin play a couple times at Bellevue West. He wasn't playing his best football. Immensely talented, but he still needs to figure it a little bit out on the field. But I believe that once Rola is done here, Kalin can take over and he'll be a heck of a quarterback. And again, I should remind you, he could win the job off the rip. That's how good of a player Daniel Kalin is. And I'm super stoked that he kept his commitment with Nebraska. Right at the end there, it looked like he might be taking a visit to Michigan State, and he said no. I don't care that Nebraska took Daniel Rola. This is where I've wanted to be my entire life. I'm going to stay with the Huskers, and I commend Daniel Kalin for that. That even speaks testaments to his character. So we'll see what happens with Danny Kalin. I really like him. It's just not a guy I expect to see within the first 2 years of his career here, but I love his future. On to his teammates, both wide receivers, starting off with Devon Hall. So Devon Hall, compared to Isaac McMorris, the other wide receiver from Bellevue West, his recruitment process started when he was a freshman in high school. He got a bunch of offers right off the bat, played as a true freshman in varsity, and he was at one point listed as a top 100 player in the country. Now he's listed as a 4-star top 300, so went a little bit down in the rankings. Has dealt with some injuries during his career, but this guy, he can do anywhere. He could play anywhere on the field. Again, he can play defensive back. He didn't really play defensive back at Bell West, but he can play anywhere. Again, he'll play wide receiver, however. Another athletic D-man, listed at 6'1", 180. You see a lot of these guys that Matt Rule gets around that 6-foot range, around that 180 range, and they can run about 4.4s, 4.5s. That's what you see from Devon Hall. I'll say this about Devon Hall. He has the best hands of any wide receiver we have got, maybe since Xavier Betts. He has the best hands in the state, best hands in the country. I'll even go as far as to say I've seen this dude make one-handed grabs after one-handed grabs. Devon Hall, dude, I mean, it feels like he got sticky substance on his gloves. That's how good of a prospect he is. Devon Hall. Well, this was a big win for the staff. He was visiting Ole Miss, Penn State. For a long time, looked like he wasn't going to come here under Scott Frost, and Matt Rule came in and said, hey, I'm going to change this. I'm going to lock him down. So Devon Hall, stud, really big get there. Then we have Isaac McMorris, 3-star prospect coming out of Bellevue West, another wide receiver. He transferred from Miller North. This is a guy who plays football and basketball, listed at 5'10", 170, so a little bit smaller receiver, but makes just as big of an impact. I mean, I just spoke about how good Devon Hall is as a prospect, is as a player. Isaiah McMorris might be better, folks. Isaiah McMorris had better statistics the last 2 years on the same team. He's a stud. He's a stud. He can do it anywhere on the field. Really good slot receiver. Get great hands. Another big win by the staff. He was considering USC for a long time, and we came in there and said no to that. We're going to lock down these players in state. I always say this about Nebraska, right? A lot of people, Scott Frost came in here and tried to lock down Nebraska, right? And he was pretty successful. He got a bunch of Lincoln kids. He got a bunch of kids out west. None of that matters if you don't lock down Omaha. And I know some Lincolnites won't like that, but Omaha has the best talent in the state. It's not even close. It's not even particularly close. You've got to lock down Omaha because we've seen a lot of great prospects come and go from the metro area, and we just haven't had their talents. And we need to lock that down. I could really care less if we lock down Lincoln, as long as we lock down Omaha at a consistent rate. So really good job by the staff getting all 3 of those guys from Bellevue West. So yeah. That brings me on to our next prospect, linebacker from Miami, Florida. He didn't flip, but he committed to us on signing day, that being Vincent Shavers. This guy, great athletic ability at that linebacker spot. You see the Rule staff really likes that. We got a guy very similar in the last class named Eric Fields. I see a lot of him in Vincent Shavers. He can rush the quarterback. He has great instinct in the run game. Nice addition, really nice addition there. On to Ashton Murphy, our next get. This guy coming from Elkhorn South. I watched Ashton Murphy in person a little bit. Watched him 3 times in person, I should say, this year. Wasn't particularly impressed. He had a pretty good game the first time I watched him against Millard South. Didn't really do much in the state title. I expect this guy to redshirt. I mean, really talented individual. He's 6'5", about 250. But he needs to work on his pass rush skills. He's a guy who can really make an impact in the run game instantly, but he does not have a bag of tricks when it comes to the pass rush. So I expect to see him redshirt for a couple or 2 years, but he could be an impact player. On to the next couple, and then I'm gonna get into the last 5 or so right off the bat. So we'll get into Caleb Benning next from West Side, in-state kid, son of Damon Benning. And Caleb's a stud, man. I watched him play a couple times this year as well. This dude might be the best player in the entire state of Nebraska. That's how good of a player Caleb Benning is. He can get it done on defense. He was a stud with the wide receiver spot for the Warriors. This was a no-brainer addition. He was uncommitted for a very long time. They had to offer him after the season he had. He's just a game wrecker. A guy you need on your roster. So Caleb Benning, we'll see what happens. I'll say this about Caleb Benning. I don't trust West Side prospects. We saw this with Kobe Bretz. Kobe Bretz was a safety we got committed from West Side, and he hasn't touched the field. Not a guy I really want on the roster coming into next year. We've seen some West Side prospects come and go. Jalen Lloyd's a guy who I feel good about in the future, but again, not really. He's a track athlete before football, so we'll see. We'll see. How that West Side pipeline goes. There's a lot of talented players that come from West Side, but there's been a lot of busts to come from West Side. We saw Avante Dickerson, another member of the secondary. He ended up committing to Oregon, and he did not play at all there, and now is in the transfer portal and doesn't have a college to his name. So there's a lot of busts who've come from West Side, so hopefully he can end that streak. We'll go off a couple more guys. Willis McGee, edge from Columbus High School in Miami, Florida. you see a lot of Miami guys. Matt Rhule said in his press conference that he's not really looking to recruit all of Florida, just Miami, because there's a lot of talent that comes from Miami, the 305. So Willis McGee, really good edge rusher, the only edge rusher we got in this class. Really good upside at 6'1", 230, really well built as a senior in high school, but a guy I imagine will redshirt as well. On to one of my guys in this class, very underrated, an offensive lineman. People will love to hear that. Gibson Pile. Gibson Pile, only listed as a 3-star. He's at 6'5", 290. However, this guy is an All-American, is on the All-American team on NBC. He lit it up in Texas his senior year of high school. He's coming from Houston, Texas. This guy might be the best O-lineman in this class, period. He is a hard worker, again, great kid, great attitude, committed early on in the process. He's a stud. This guy, if he was committed to Alabama or Georgia, he'd instantly be bumped up to a 4-star. He's a stud. Gibson Pile, very underlooked in this process. He might be the best O-lineman we have in the class of 2024. And that speaks volumes given the fact that we have 2 other really quality guys at the O-line position named Grant Bricks and Preston Namoa. So Gibson Pile's a stud. On to Mario Buford, brother of Marquez Buford, coming from DeSoto, Texas, starting defensive back there. Another stud. Listed as a 3-star prospect. He should be a 4-star prospect. That's what he used to be. Offers from Georgia, offers from Oregon. Really, really good prospect. 6 foot tall, 170. Really love his upside. Again, he was a starting corner for the best high school team in America. That speaks volumes. Mario Buford, just think about how good his brother is. Mario Buford might be a lot better. So, really good prospect there. Let's just go over some of the other players in this class. We have Evan Taylor, really, really big defensive back coming out of a ACL injury. So we'll see what happens there, but really like Evan Taylor. Keelan Smith, man. I was meaning to get to Keelan Smith. Keelan Smith, I know I just said Gibson Pile is my guy in this class. Keelan Smith is my guy. We see a lot of really talented tight ends in this class. Keelan Smith might be better than top 100 prospect Carter Nelson. I mean that when I say that. Keelan Smith was named the best player in all of Missouri high school football this year. I don't know how familiar my viewers are with Missouri high school football. There's 5 stars that routinely come from there. We saw 2 already. We saw Williams Nwaneri, who was a defensive lineman, and he's committed to Mizzou. And then we saw Ryan Wingo, committed to Texas, come from Missouri. We saw a lot of 4 stars, a lot of 5 stars come from the state of Missouri, and Keelan Smith was better than them all. And he led his team on his back to a state title, and he was named the best player in the entire state. That's how good of a prospect Keelan Smith is. Listed as 6'3", 200 pounds. Honestly, he could play wide receiver for us. This guy is a stud. Really under the radar. Huge win for Matt Rhule. Let's get into some of the guys that I wasn't a big fan of getting on this class. So when you hear the scholarships go around, you hear the scholarships conversation all the time, it feels like now with the transfer portal. There's a lot of guys in this class that I feel like Matt Rhule kind of reached on, that we really didn't need to get. And a lot of times what we see is that Matt Rhule gets some dudes that are under the radar and are boom or busts. And there's a lot of guys in here who are booms, but there's a lot of guys who I think will be busts. And let's just get into just a couple that I wasn't a big fan of. I mean, objectively, I'm wishing them well, but I wasn't a huge fan of us signing them. Brilin PRS, the first guy, comes from Texas, plays the linebacker position, kind of underweight. He's at 6'4", 190. He's going to have to put on about 30 pounds of weight to play linebacker at Nebraska. Really good athleticism. He runs a 4.4 at that linebacker spot, but this is a guy who does not have any offers to his name. We were his only offer. His only other offer, let's see real quick, I'm going to pull up on 24/7, was from Eastern Illinois and FCS school. That's a problem. Like, I'm not a huge fan of evaluating prospects based on their stars or their 24/7 ranking. I'm a huge fan of judging them based on their offers. Because if a guy does not have a bunch of offers, especially D1 offers, like this is just one other D1 offer, that's kind of a problem. And in the state, it's really hard to be that under the radar in the state of modern day college football recruiting. There's huddle clips everywhere. It's really hard to be that under the radar. I know everyone's going to bring up, well, Justin Jefferson was not very well recruited. Well, that is a complete outlier situation. That's a 1 in a million type of prospect. So I wasn't a big fan of the Pruitt edition. A couple others I wasn't a huge fan of. Quinn Clark, you know, here's my thing about Quinn Clark. He's 6'5", 190. Nothing he does is incredibly impressive. He's not fast. He runs about a 4.7. His footwork is not great at the wide receiver position. Was not even the receiving leader in Montana. There's not a lot of prospects who come from Montana. And the reason why I'm harsh about these gets is because I wouldn't be otherwise harsh about this maybe 10 years ago. But when the transfer portal exists, every scholarship matters. So you have to get guys who you know are going to be producers. Because effectively, you're wasting a scholarship on them if they aren't. Please tell me, somebody in the comment section, tell me you'd rather have, you know, a low 3-star wide receiver over a quality, you know, wide receiver coming from the FCS levels who had more than 1,000 yards, who we know is productive in college football. Like, yeah, you'd obviously rather have the transfer. So it's okay for Matt Rule, in my opinion, to get, and who, you know, I'm just a fanalist, right? Matt Rule knows more than I do, but it's okay for him to get a couple boomer bust guys, but when you get a lot of these guys, yeah, you're going to have a couple busts, and that might not be the best thing. On to some other dudes. Rex Guthrie, pretty solid, hard hitter, safety. Ian Flint, he's okay. His sister goes to Nebraska as a track athlete, I believe. So he's all right. Pretty good blocker, pretty good weight at that position. He's 250. So he might honestly be an instant impact. Larry Tarver, we flipped him on signing day from Maryland. He plays defensive back, 4-star according to Rivals. Really like that get. He said in an interview that he's bringing along someone with him, that being Amari Sanders, another defensive back from Miami, who is also borderline 4-star. So we got a lot of good defensive backs in this class. Some O-linemen to round things off, Landon Davidson, Alexander Regolari, Jake Peters. These guys really don't move the needle. Nothing they do on tape is incredibly impressive. You know, these dudes are developmental pieces. We won't see their name called for 3 years. You know, and hopefully by the end of that 3-year span, they'll be quality starters. So these guys to keep an eye on. And then a couple in-state guys to end things off. First one being Donovan Jones, another corner. Watched him play in person a couple times at Omaha North. Really good prospect. He plays wide receiver too. Really good hands at the defensive back spot. Pretty physical. A guy who I was kind of nervous about when we offered him a scholarship, but I think that was a really good evaluation by Evan Cooper and Matt Rule. And then Eric Ingerson, tight end from Papua Vista. This one's kind of special. One of my best friends in elementary school, that being Eric, he commits to Nebraska, so really rooting for him. But he's a stud. Listed at 6'7", 250. He was originally committed to Pitt. Really good player. I would love to see if we end up putting him on the D-line. I think that's where we should put him at with his attributes. We have too many tight ends in this class. Let's call it what it is. We have 4 tight end commits. We should never have more than 2 tight end commits, ever. So hopefully we move Eric to D-line. I would be interesting to see if we move Ian Flint too, because I think Keelan Smith and Carter Nelson will stay put at tight end. So it'll be interesting there. But I think we did get too many tight ends in this class. And then last one, that being Camden Cook, the son of Pask punter from Nebraska, who had a long career with the Ravens. So legacy kid. Hopefully he's an instant impact at that punter position. We need it. We need it too, because Brian Bushini is coming back for another year. And as a lot of you know, and a lot of you probably agree with me, Brian Bushini was probably had the worst punter year we've seen since Caleb Lightbourne. Like, Brian Bushini was awful this year. Historically bad. So I do not feel good about him being our day one kicker, or excuse me, our day one punter. So hopefully Camden Cook can really question that. So that's the class, everybody. 29 commits. 29 commits, man. A lot of guys who are really good. A lot of guys that are boomer busts. So hopefully Matt Rule did a good evaluation on them. The big storyline is I feel like we loaded up on a lot of positions we shouldn't have. I'll just go over everything. We had 2 quarterback commits, 5 receiver commits, 4 tight end commits, 6 OT commits. So out of our 29 commits total, most of them were on the offensive side of the ball. Then we had 1 D-line, which is a problem, 1 edge, which is a problem, 2 linebackers, all right. And then we had 7 defensive backs. A little bit too much here, not enough on the other side, not very even. We saw when Matt Rule got here, he got 6 wide receiver commits off the bat, or 6 wide receiver true freshmen. I did not think that was a good idea. So I don't know. Again, a lot of these guys, I can't help but think won't stick around long. And that's college football recruiting. That's not a shot at Matt Rule. It's not a shot at anybody, but that's just the way college football works. But really good class by Nebraska, man. It'll end as a top 20 class according to 24/7. Stud class. I will say this about the class, and this is the one thing that kind of frustrates me. We did not sign on running back. We saw we had Kalin Lacey up until December, stud running back from Louisiana. He ended up decommitting. It's now a Mizzou commit. Man, that was a huge loss. Kalin Lacey, man, he can do it all for us. And man, we kind of let his recruitment go under the wayside. We also lost Carlin Jones, another 4-star defensive lineman, right at the end of that recruiting process. He ended up committing to Southern Cal. So that was another pretty big loss. But I think the staff did not do a great job recruiting running backs in this class. They kind of were banking on Lacey signing with them, and when Lacey left, they had no other ulterior guys to go after. So it will be interesting to see if we get a transfer at that spot. I'll have a video coming out in about a week talking about the transfer portal or lack thereof transfer additions. But we need a running back addition. We need it. I mean, Gabe Irving is probably our best our best running back on the roster. That's a problem. I love Gabe Irvin, but in Big Ten play, you just got to have another guy. You got to have a guy who could potentially get your offense to the next level. And unfortunately, we just don't have that on the roster right now. So was really hoping Quan Lacey was the guy, but he ends up not being it. So overall, really, really good class. Now I'm going to go over my Super 6. Now these are 6 guys that I feel really, really good about producing at a high level here, being here their entire career and potentially being difference makers to bring this program around. First one, no-brainer, Dylan Rola. I don't have to explain myself there. Number 2 and 3 are my guys who are underrated, that being Gibson Pile and Kalin Smith at the O-line and tight end position respectively. Those guys are just straight out studs, underrated. Yeah, no questions asked there. Number 4, Grant Bricks at the offensive line spot. Love him. Just was such a big get. You can't speak higher enough about him. Guy who could play as soon as his redshirt freshman year, maybe even as a true freshman. He has the weight to back it up. Keeping it with the offensive lineman, Tamoa. That is my 5th. Another Polynesian pipeline guy, I want to keep around for a long time. Hopefully he stays. The only thing I'm worried about is a lot of times when these Polynesian kids move to Nebraska, they don't adjust very well. They're used to 70, 80 degrees every single day. They're homesick. They're so far away from their parents. So hopefully he gets used to that. And the last one, I had a couple options I wanted to go here. Did I want to go with Carter Nelson? Maybe a couple in-state wide receivers. I'm going to go with Roger Gradney. This is our first commit in the class. Has not wavered ever since then. Everybody you speak to is very high on him. Again, very loyal. From a physicality standpoint, has everything you want. Can run a 4.4. Great height at the DB spot. We'll see what position he ends up playing. I would love if he ended up playing DB, but I think he'll play wide receiver. But, man, he's a stud, and that will end my Super 6. Feel really good about that Super 6, dude. Feel really good about it. And again, there's a couple of guys that didn't make the list that I feel great about. Again, Carter Nelson, I feel great about. Jakori Barney, I feel great about. The 2 Bellevue West receivers, I feel awesome about. Danny Kalin. I mean, it keeps on going. This is a great class, man. Yeah, really good class. I'll say this about Matt Rule, though. Again, there are a couple of dudes out here that are boom or bust. In the modern day college football, if let's say, and let's just make up a guy. Let's say we get a guy by the name of, Jack Smith, right? And Jack Smith is a linebacker, and he's a low 3-star. And let's say Jack Smith does not play the first 2 years and is not looking to play his 3rd year. You've got to cut ties with him. That's the way college football works. You've got to be aggressive. And you got to say, hey, man, if you're not doing anything for me lately, why are you here? Okay, there's two reasons why you keep guys on scholarship. One, it's because they're producing for you already, or 2, they have high upside and they're going to produce for you in the near future. If they're not going to do that, they don't deserve to be here in the modern realm of college football. And that's how you get them back on top. So yeah, overall, great class. Probably the best class we have got since 2018, that being Scott Frost's first class here. Just retain them, develop. You did the best job you could. You got a bunch of really talented players. Now keep them on the roster, develop them, make them NFL players, make them impact players who will bring Nebraska back to where we should be. So let me know if you guys have anything else to add. Really long video. I hope you guys watched the majority of it. Let me know your Super 6 down below. Who are your top 6 guys in this class? Who do you think is going to play as a true freshman? Maybe something you agree with me with, something you disagree with me with. Let me know down below. But as always, go Matt Rule, go Big Red. See you in the next one, everybody.